and welcome to AFI Fest presented by Audi. My name is Sarah Harris. I'm the Director of Programming for AFI Festivals. First, I want to thank all of our supporters of the festival, including our presenting sponsor, Audi, our cultural partner for this film, Elma, AFI members, and you, our audience. Thank you for joining us. I'm honored to be here today with the directors of Wolfwalkers, Tomm and Ross Stewart. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi, Sarah.
It is early morning here, late afternoon for you. I'm so glad we can make this work. And first of all, congratulations on such a beautiful film. We are honored to be hosting the US premiere at AFI Fest, and this is just a really incredible story and movie that I hope everyone at home enjoyed. I want to just kick it off with a couple of questions of this is the third in this series of Irish folklore stories that you've created. And I'm curious if that was always your intention when you started, your company years ago, and God, I mean, it's been 10, 12 years since Secret KELLS.
We were
always the intention.
Yeah, no, when we were at your festival 10 years ago, we couldn't believe that we'd actually finished Secret of Kells and it was actually being released in the world, and we were in America showing it to American people. But it was after we kind of got going with Song of the Sea that we had the idea for Wolfwalkers. And at that point, Ross and I had been talking about co-directing something, and I sort of felt it would be nice to, have 3 as a nice number and kind of put a cap on everything we'd learned, and finally use one final project to fully explore a lot of the themes and ideas that we'd been interested in and had been working through in the previous 2.
Yeah, I think like when we were making Secret of Kells, we, not even in our wildest dreams would we have thought we'd be able to make 3 films.
Yeah. Just getting
making one was enough,
Yeah.
But we kind of feel that like the three films work together, and it's time to maybe put a full stop after it. And maybe the next films will be will be able to be very different and go in different directions. They won't be held onto these.
There's something about the 3. They fit together. Any more than that, we'd start getting repetitive. But I think they all fit together and they all kind of speak to each other. And a lot of the visual language and stuff we evolved in Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea kind of came to a fruition with Wolfwalkers. So it kind of feels like a good pause point, all right.
Yeah. So when did you really start Wolfwalkers in earnest? How long ago?
In full production about 3 years ago, but we had the idea 7 years ago, and we spent about 2 years writing and developing it before we got into full production. So,
Yeah, like we were working on other projects while developing Wolfwalkers at the start. Tomm was finishing off Song of the Sea, and then directly after that, we did that segment for The Prophet.
Yeah.
And then after that, we were really focusing on working on the script just with Will Collins and us doing concept art.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was 4 years, and then 3 years ago, just got stuck into production.
Yeah, while Nora was directing Breadwinner, we did a little bit at the start of Breadwinner, but then for most of that production, we were writing and developing Wolfwalkers to be ready for it to go into production after Breadwinner. So we kind of benefited from a lot of the crew who were kind of trained up and ready to start again on the next project. So we've been lucky with the studio that we've had an opportunity to roll one project after the other. It's kind of like chain smokers lighting the next cigarette off the butt of the previous one or something.
Right. And so has art history, like I want to talk about, obviously the style, but the kind of approach, but has art history always been a major interest for you? And, I think there's definitely kind of a universality to the myths that are in culture and the stories that are told. But I think what's wonderful about this film and the others is that you do kind of have this merging of art history with folklore. Is that always been something you're interested in?
Yeah, and also because it serves the stories. I think something about hand-drawn animation allows you to take inspiration from the art from the era that you're looking at, So like for Wolfwalkers, we were able to take inspiration from the woodblock prints that were being used for propaganda at the time. And I think art history just naturally flows as part of the research for the projects.
Yeah, probably because we're working in 2D and using traditional media, and that like a lot of the reference folders that we would use for even the background arts had like impressions, painters, watercolor painters of like, you know, the 1800s and that. So because we're trying to recreate that look on screen. But then I reckon like our interest in storytelling and like art history came from like our secondary school, and we just kept that interest up. It seems natural to tie the two together, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the wood blocking. I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, because it was based on kind of that early printing.
Yeah, that was like
that
that was their kind of fake news propaganda machine in 1650. They printed off these pamphlets of all the things they wanted to get people enraged about the Irish, and like sometimes they would be printing it so fast that it would hit and then kind of offset, and the color or the print wouldn't quite match up. So we tried to even get that look into it. So maybe the people who've just watched the movie might have noticed that sometimes the people in the town, their color goes a little bit outside the lines as if it's been printed in a hurry, you know.
Yeah, it's a really cool kind of detail to the film that is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on. The other part I wanted, as far as like style, is I wanted to kind of hear the development or the choices that went into deciding on the kind of contrast between the town and the forest, which is so beautifully done. And I think it's, you know, it symbolizes so many different things. Just tell us a little bit about kind of that development and the getting to that decision.
Well, like from the very early time of working on the story, Tomm and myself had these, you know, kind of thematic contrasts, like, you know, instinct, wildness, and like, you know, chaos versus order and control and cage, you know, like representing the town for Robyn and then the forest for Mebh. And so these two worlds had to contrast the whole way through. So I remember we had that up on the wall, and every time we were coming up with concepts for each world, they kind of had to reinforce one of the two contrasts. So like it eventually ended up being transferred into even the line of the characters and the way that the paintings were done underneath the line layouts and everything like that. So you have this very free, very energetic world of the forest, and it's very much like Mebh, you know, it's out of control, but it's very instinctive, and it's loose and curving. And then you have this town style that's very controlled, very like geometric, and it's like a big cage for Robyn, you know, very aggressive, like pointed lines and everything like that. So it all comes from the story. It has to reinforce the story first and foremost, you know.
I think for me as well, when we released Song of the Sea, I was doing these interviews saying that hand-drawn animation is a language to itself, and talking about hand-drawn animation being more expressive. And then I saw The Tale of Princess Kaguya from Takahata and Studio Ghibli that was released that year, and it really gave me a kick in the pants, because everything I was talking about, it was doing multiplied by 10. And it kind of laid down the gauntlet, I think, for us to try and be more expressive and more energetic in how we draw like if the character is angry, we try and make the lines and how we draw them angry, or if things are peaceful, we try and use the shapes and colors and actually how we lay the brush strokes down to reinforce that, to really try and lift the level of expressiveness beyond what you usually see in hand-drawn animation, and to kind of take the production line feeling out of it, so it doesn't just feel like a load of technicians. Kind of everybody involved in the production is an artist, and they're kind of using what they do to kind of help tell the story visually. So it's the complete opposite of that very you know, generic looking, everything is precise and perfect that you sometimes get in CGI. It's all about the rough edges, you know. So that was kind of something we were passionate about.
I think like for short animated films, you can really push the boat out and be as expressive and experimental as you want. But as soon as it goes into a feature-length film, you know, you're dealing with like how to get 100 people on style and how to deal with these massive departments. So usually you can't be as experimental, or you can't be as brave maybe in some of those choices. It's just not possible. So I think in Wolfwalkers, we wanted to really push it as experimental as, say, on a short film.
Yeah, we were fighting to keep it like that. And then actually it was really heartening, because we were always saying, oh, you never see this in features. But then we saw things like Into the Spider-Verse and all last year. And it's nice to see that other animators now are pushing out with that like strict mold of everything has to look kind of perfect. And they're trying the language of comic books and illustration. So I'm excited that that's going on now, you know.
Yeah, so, and that kind of that brought up something else I wanted to talk about, which is that you do play with the kind of compositions and borrowing the way that you tell the story from, you know, comic books or historical illustrations and things like that. And I really enjoy that in the film. I think it's a nice kind of little quirk to it that keeps you engaged differently than you see in you know, what's been considered standard modern.
Yeah.
And,
I think a lot of cartoons have this kind of inferiority complex where they're just trying to be, you know, live action that happens to be animation, and they take all their cues from live action, but actually hand-drawn animation, and basically animation in general, has the ability to play with everything that you can do on the page, you know? So you can change the aspect ratio, you can change, as I said, how things are drawn, and compositions aren't limited to what can really be captured by a camera. So we kind of try to, you know, what's the expression? When Impressionism came in, they knew that the camera could photograph things perfectly. So they went beyond realism into something much more impressionistic. And I think that's what animation can still offer, even though you've got this perfect CG, which can be really beautiful, that looks almost more real than real. We can kind of go the other direction and just play with split screens and everything that you can do that isn't in front of a camera, but it only exists like on a page.
Yeah, because like that helps serve the story too. Like I remember Sin City. Sin City was brave in that it was like trying out like, you know, vertical panels and like you know, like split screen shots like that. And it was just strange that a hand-drawn animated feature wouldn't have done that, because it's the perfect medium for it.
And we were looking at like early cinema, like the German expressionists and stuff, and like they would literally paint the shadows on the ground, and you know, so we kind of said, let's get brave again, you know, instead of just trying to be as good as real life, you know, we can go further.
Yeah, I think it's a really wonderful touch, and one of the one element that makes the film even more exciting in our world of cinema right now. I also wanted to kind of ask about the wolf vision, I guess, for lack of a better term, on that idea, because it is. I mean, this all goes back to like the freedom that animation can give you to tell a story. And how did that evolve? How did that kind of come up as an idea of really a point of view with this kind of trippy scent?
Yeah. Well, it was a thematic thing that we were excited to try and show, that when somebody who's been hunting an animal sees the world through the eyes, literally, of that animal, their whole perspective is going to change. And that's kind of what the movie's about. Like, the two main characters, Mebh and Robyn, are from very different worlds. And the fact that Robyn's able to see the world through a totally new perspective, from a totally different point of view, and that's what changes her. And I think that's what we need. Like, when people are very atomized and only see things from their point of view, and they feel very divided from the other, to be able to see the world through imagination for what it would be like for the other person is really important. So we knew it was going to be an important thing in the movie, and we talked a lot about, and we researched a lot about how the world appears to wolves. Like, they have less color receptors and stuff in their eyes, and yet smells and things they can hear must be much more part of how they perceive the world than it is for us. So we talked about how we could represent it.
Yeah, and we also knew that it had to be this thing that made the audience sit up in their seats, you know, like a roller coaster ride, just so that we could see that once Robyn experiences this, it's totally outside of her normal frame of reference, and she can never really go back to being the Robyn that she was before. It has to completely, utterly change her world perception. So because all of the rest of the film is so 2D and very, very flat, you know, without like perspective, it was only natural that Wolf Vision then had to be really immersive and really like use the language of like normal CG kind of like fly through, you know, like modes, in order to make it seem like such a jump from her normal world. So we worked with this amazing director, Evan McNamara, an Irish director up in Dublin, and he's worked with a lot of traditional media and stop motion and that. And collaborating with him, we kind of came up with this idea of using CG fly-throughs and then hand rendering them, you know, page by page by page. So we have a stack of paper downstairs with all these beautiful charcoal drawings and pencil drawings on them that were scanned in laboriously.
It was a bit crazy. It was a bit crazy. Like, usually animate the characters and paint the backgrounds, but this time he was animating the backgrounds as well. So every single frame is a fresh page. And his team were really amazing because they weren't just animating sort of straight ahead. They were animating the trees, they were animating the scents, they were animating the characters and everything, all with charcoal and pencil on paper. So I think it's exciting because we've never done anything like that before in any of our previous movies, but it feels of a part with the rest of it, you know.
Yeah, I think there's just so many different things you're doing in this film. It's like, it seems incredibly challenging to to all the different paths you went down, and this is one of them that I think is makes it actually extra special.
Well, we'd have to give a shout out to our technical director, Mark Mullery, then, because like his job was, like, we were coming up with the ideas and it was his job to actually implement them and make it all streamlined. So he was very patient with us, I have to say.
Open to all our ideas to experiment and everything. But yeah, our organic attitude to let's try this, let's try that must have been quite hard for the technical team.
But it paid off completely. Yeah. So everyone should be happy with it now. I have a good friend of mine that's also very much a fan in animation, and I was talking to her about this film, and she, I was like, if you had a question, what would it be? She said that she wanted to know how technology has affected your pipeline and process, and if it has informed your design. So how, since, in the 10 years, there's obviously been changes in this.
Well, I will say that it's allowed for more creativity. I mean, the handmade look has kind of become our trademark, but like Secret of Kells was drawn on paper, but the fact that it was drawn on paper in like 5 different studios around the world actually was limiting in what we dared to try. But now that we're drawing on Cintiqs, like we're drawing on tablets, we can still have the look of hand drawn, like we still draw every frame, but we're way more able to share files and draw over each other's drawings and kind of have a more experimental pipeline. It's funny because when we were shipping piles and piles of paper all around the world to be animated and in between somewhere else and then coming back here to be scanned, it really was scary to try anything outside of the traditional standardized pipeline. But now we can try, like Wolf Vision is a good example. I mean, that is, first Evan built the environment in virtual reality, and then he printed out frame by frame the environment, the 3D environment, and then each frame of that was hand rendered and hand drawn and then scanned and back in. So we were able to use technology but still use hand drawn traditional techniques, and it kind of came together in the end. It was crazy, but it was definitely something I wouldn't have tried without the ability to use.
And the fact that we're not using so much paper now is better for the environment. Not as many trees are being cut down.
We're using more electricity.
Like if we're making a film about how bad it is to cut down the forest, it'd be really hypocritical to use loads and loads of paper.
We did use a lot of paper from sustainably managed forests.
But then equally in the backgrounds and stuff, like the artists would paint textures on paper and scan them in and then play around in Photoshop. So they wouldn't have to do a brand new painting for every single background. So yeah, technology just allows, I think, more streamlined productivity kind of.
Definitely the animation. I feel the animation quality, the character animation has gone up with the ability for us to be able to use TV Paint and software like that to animate, because we still draw every frame, but every frame is much more malleable than when it was on paper, when you were just, okay, we managed to get it done, let's just scan it and move on.
Right.
I'd say the one department that would benefit most, I'd say, would be compositing.
Yeah.
From technology.
Ink and paint and compositing. Like we moved to digital ink and paint, even back on Secret of Kells, and the amount of things like making it look like an offset print or making it look like watercolors and stuff is so much more manageable with digital ink and paint and compositing. So you can do a lot more. Ironically, you can make something look a lot more handmade because you've got infinite redos and retakes and changes that you can do.
Yeah. So we got to wrap it up pretty soon, but I have kind of, I guess it's 2 questions as one piece, but I'm curious, and then this is kind of going way back into what inspired you all those years ago to get into animation, if it was any particular work that influenced you, or just like as a kid, was it just drawing? Like what made you pursue it? And then any advice for some young artists that might be watching right now?
Well, I remember Tom and myself, when we were teenagers, we went for a day visit to Don Bluth Studios in Dublin. I can't remember, in the 80s it would have been, probably
90s, early 90s.
early 90s.
Yeah.
And we were blown away. It was like visiting, you know, Willy Wonka's chocolate factory or something. It was just crazy. And I think that made a huge lasting impression on us. But
the fact that animation was being made in Ireland and that we could meet the artists who were making these features made it seem real. Otherwise, it might have just seemed like magic, you know. And we were both members of Young Irish Filmmakers here in Kilkenny, where we got to mess around with the early 90s technology that allowed us to start playing around with animation.
But I think one thing, though, is that like both of us were really interested in comics. And I first of all wanted to be an illustrator, and then ended up doing animation because there wasn't an illustration course available. But then, like, we're able to kind of merge the two, you know, in films like Wolfwalkers and Secret of KELLS and that. You know, I think that's probably why we have influences from all kinds of other backgrounds and not just animation.
That's maybe what I'd say to young people, not to get too fixated on just, say, anime or Disney or any one particular style. Have as broad an influence as possible and get loads of influences and stir them all up before you settle on any one style. Keep your interests outside of animation. Look to theater, look to, you know, illustration or classical painting, anything that can kind of inform your taste so that you have as wide a taste as possible. And then you'll find your own style through a process of kind of lowest common denominator. You'll just absorb it all and it'll come out, rather than trying to copy just one particular artist. That's my advice I always give young people, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about this beautiful film. I'm very honored to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's just kudos. I'm excited for it, and excited to have audiences see it late 2020 this year. So yeah, everyone at home, thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear from you on social media, #AFIFest, and check out Wolfwalkers again later this fall. Thanks.
Thank you to AFI Fest for showing Wolfwalkers.
Thanks.